This is the most submissions we've ever gotten for a community redraw episode. There's so much cool stuff sent in. We got over 50 different supervillains sent in for me to potentially redraw on PopCross Studios, and I know I say this every time, but it was so hard picking which ones to redraw. I drew more than usual in this episode. We're drawing 8 supervillains, and it was so hard to choose. You're all just super talented, had so many cool ideas. Also, if I sound a little bit raspy and out of it, it's because I'm still a little bit sick. That's why this video is a little bit delayed, so if I sound a little bit like bleh, that's why. Apologies in advance. But this is gonna be a long one, so let's just jump right into the first drawing and I'll pepper in some fun nonsense in between submissions. Let's go! Alright, now this first one was submitted by KingBaller06, and when I saw the design, I knew I wanted to redraw it. I just thought it was super cool looking, and then the description just sold me on it that much more. KingBaller06 says, "This character is my first villain character. His name is Vana. First of all, sick name. I love that name, Vana. It's awesome. He lives in a world where people have spontaneously awakened special powers, and he happens to be a gifted fellow. He has the natural ability to use 2 powers, where one hardens his skin, and the other allows him to control fire. He recently discovered his hardening abilities, so he can't use it fully, but there is opportunity there through training." Now, the reason that struck me right away is because, very coincidentally, that is almost the exact same power set as the main character of the first book I ever self-published in the Multiverse Tales series. This guy right here, Sterling Angeal. He's got the power to control fire, and he can make his arms go all like metal, and he can use a bit of a melted metal so he can shape his arms and stuff. KingBaller's character didn't have so much of a metal to him when he hardened. It was more like a like almost Diamond Head from Ben 10, or maybe Scales or something, and that just made me want to draw it that much more because I love drawing that kind of texture. A lot of stuff I've been doing lately where I've got a character that's got that kind of texture, I've realized that it's really cool doing like really sharp lines of lighting and shadow to make those edges really pop, even on an area that seems like it would be one solid texture. It's super cool adding those cracks with just a bit of sharp lighting, and I love that. With this one, I had a lot of fun making the pose really dynamic. I had him kind of running towards us, hand back with a fireball kind of cocked, and his arm up in front of him as if he's like using the hardened arm to block bullet fire or something like that, and I just thought it was a fun, cool pose. The only thing I think I messed up a bit was the elbow is a bit wonky. I tried to add a bit of a spike to his elbow, and it still looks just a little bit off, and maybe his fist too. But overall, this one was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for submitting it, KingBaller06, and here is the finished product. Alright, next up we've got a character sent in by Tyler. In the Discord, spelt TY1R. And this character's name is EXO. He's super cool looking. There are a lot of cyborgs submitted. I don't know if I should or should not have expected that, but I was surprised. Lots of cyborgs. Anyway, EXO is a failed lab experiment to help fight the evil forces of this world. Unfortunately, it went horribly wrong and ended up with a super powerful mechanical supervillain. He can shoot fire and energy from his hands and feet. He also has a sword that forms straight from his forearm called Excalibur. Love it. Thought it was super cool looking. I did end up changing, I added some details on my end. I changed up the form of his legs a little bit, made it a little bit more Iron Man-ish. And then I added a little bit more red along him to make him a little bit more sinister looking. I really liked that his eyes were kind of red, and I was like, I'm gonna put that theme a little bit more through his body, running down his face and his cheeks. And random side note, this is one of my favorite hands I've drawn in a while. Maybe it's because it's supposed to look a little bit mechanical, but it thrust forward. I really like how that turned out. But anyway, I do really like this character. I thought it was super cool, and I liked that he kind of had some of his bits spilling out of his arm, like some wires and stuff. I thought that was cool. I also tried to draw him in pretty similar of a pose to what you did, just kind of tilt him forward so he's aiming the hand cannon a little bit, not at the camera, but at someone closer to the camera. And yeah, this one was a lot of fun. So I hope you like it. Thank you so much for the submission, and here's the finished result. Now this next one was submitted by July on the Discord, and this one I took on almost as a challenge to myself because the design was very simple. Not to say there's anything wrong with the simple design, it's super cool looking, I loved it, it's really creepy, gave me a sort of Venom mixed with No Face from Spirited Away kind of vibe. Anyway, I thought it was cool, but I wasn't sure what I was going to be able to do with it because it was very simple. So I was like, okay, I'm going to tackle this, I'm going to make it really like goopy and kind of oily looking and like a Venom symbiote that's just gotten a cracked mask on it or something. And anyway, I should give you July's description. It's, here's a drawing of my villain submission in his first and simplest form. He has no set name, but owns the title of Corruptor of Souls. That's another awesome name, I love it. Corruptor of Souls, ooh, creepy. At this point, he has a simple pillar with arms and a mask/face coming out of a puddle of darkness with a slime-like consistency. As he progresses in power, he gains complexity. So I guess my version is a little bit more evolved. It's kind of like a bent pillar almost, with a big base pool of ooze that it's kind of standing on, and it got one hand raised. Anyway, his main ability is complete control over his shape, being able to shift into whatever form he pleases or requires. He can also come to possess people, animals, plants, objects, etc., driving them to evil, hence the reason for his namesake, Corruptor of Souls. And I did have a lot of fun with this one, and I really like how it turns out, and it's another one of those cases where in a bunch of community redraw episodes, some of the simpler ones have ended up being some of my favorites. Like, I just really like how it turns out. My favorite part of this one is probably the gradient being like, it's pretty light, but there's a dark purple gradient at the base that goes up into more of a just a saturated gray color for the rest of it. And I think that's really cool looking. It gives it a bit of variety for a pretty simple design. And then I just tried putting lines of goop and splotch and blah everywhere. I kind of looked at some reference images of Mark Bagley's drawings of Venom. He's one of my old favorite comic artists, and for Ultimate Venom, he made him very like veiny and goopy and whatever, and that was good inspiration for a piece that I really had a lot of fun with. So thank you for submitting it, July. Here is the final result. Behind me are two largely underwhelming redraws of Sir Lowe's art, which is coming up. I redraw it a third time, it's coming up later in this video. But basically the reason this video is late is because the day that I had originally started this video, I got sick and I was feeling just so out of it, but I was like, I gotta get the video done, we gotta do this. Then I drew this first piece, it was no good. I drew the second one, I still didn't like it, so I just had to go, okay, I guess I'm just sick enough that I can't draw right now. I went to bed. Couple days later, got all healthy, came back to it, and I get back to Sir Lowe's art at the very end. It was the last one I drew after I'd gotten my confidence back up, and I really like how that one turned out, so anyway, sorry this video's late, let's get into the next redraw. Next up, we've got a submission from WorldSea, and this is another one where when I saw it, I was like, I'm definitely drawing this, it's so cool, although admittedly, it's one that, when I saw it, I thought to myself, I don't really know if this is going to look better in my style. This has a very Mike Mignola, Hellboy, BPRD kind of look to it, and I think it looks best in that style, but I just thought it was such a cool looking character that I was like, I gotta try something out with it. And here's the description, it's a pretty short one. This guy is a Russian agent that died, and he was resurrected by a power that is unexplainable. So again, felt very, very Hellboy, BPRD, like not Cthulhu, what's the guy who, like, H.P. Lovecraft kind of story, just some kind of horror-ish supervillain. And I also obviously had a little bit of Dr. Octopus in the back of my mind because he's got 4 octopus-like tentacles coming out of him. So I actually based the pose for my drawing off of a Dr. Octopus image that came to my head from Spider-Man 2, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man 2, where Dr. Octopus realizes that he's just robbed a bank, I think it is, and that his arms are talking to him and starting to control him a bit, and he goes like, no, and his arms go up in the air. Actually, maybe that might be a different part of the movie. It might be after he's escaped from the place where he was, the hospital or whatever. Anyway, this one was a lot of fun. I thought it was really cool. Coloring wise, I tried to keep it very simple in terms of, like, I kept it very green, a bit of yellow, and then for the rim lighting and other lighting, I did it in red. So I had that nice kind of balance of red and green that just made it look kind of eerie and creepy, and I like how it turned out in the end. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for your submission. Here's the finished result. Next up, we've got a submission from Lord Shadow, who I've actually redrawn one of his characters before in the Superheroes episode, so this was a fun one to go back to his sort of style. I've been trying to prioritize drawing people's art who I've never redrawn their stuff on the channel before, but I saw this one and I was like, this is a good, traditional looking supervillain that I really wanted to redraw, so we got him up here. And there wasn't much in terms of a description for this guy, except that he was a bit of a Thanos Darkseid style villain. And I also realized after I've drawn him that Lord Shadow specified that the shoulder pads and the belt could be a bit bigger than what he'd drawn. I probably made them a bit smaller, but I still think this one's really cool looking. It is a very traditional one. It's not, I didn't give him a super dynamic pose. It was another one where I kind of tried to match the pose that Lord Shadow had sent, only I've got Cosmos kind of floating up in the air a little bit. With that name, I kind of felt like he should be off the ground and looking down on people. I liked how he had the sort of Doctor Doom style hand up in the air raised, so I wanted to keep that, and then just the cape flowing in the background a little bit. And this one, because the pose was kind of simple, I got to focus a little bit more on the rendering, and I really like how this one turned out. My only problem with it is probably that my eye is kind of drawn to his lower leg, because it seems like I added a bit more shine and gleam there than anywhere else, so my eye is just kind of drawn there because it's one of the main points of contrast. But that's a small thing. I do really like how this one turned out, and I hope you do as well, Lord Shadow. So here is the final result of Cosmos. Now the next character we've got is called Narciso, and it's submitted by TNG, or Call Me T, and this one, just everything about it was super interesting to me. Both the look, the description, it was all great. The look, when I was scrolling through, it was like, it really stood out. It was something pretty different from anything else submitted. I thought it was really cool looking, and I was super curious when I looked at it what this guy's deal was. And then the description was just great. It says, my submission, Narciso, Olympic athlete turned model turned self-absorbed villain. So in love with himself that he learned how to harvest reflected light to produce clones of himself. Now he seeks to possess every light source to provide an army of himself. And that was just like a fun, I love a really arrogant, self-obsessed character, and just a villain like that. I just could picture so many fun, goofy scenarios for this guy, and right away I knew what pose I wanted to draw him in, kind of like holding out a mirror and like doing a little pose like he's checking himself out. I didn't end up doing a mirror, I did that kind of mirror blade thing that he seems to have in his hand, and admittedly the angle I have him holding it at, he wouldn't really be able to see himself probably, but that's fine. This one was a blast. I like the color palette. It's very Aquaman looking, and I don't know if I really had many submissions that were in this kind of color palette, and I really liked it. And I knew that the mirrors were going to be kind of fun to draw, so I tried to put a bit of a focus on doing slightly different rendering on the mirror bits versus the skin bits. Not skin bits, the costume bits. I tried to put a bit more of a faded shadowing on them and harder shadows on the mirrors. And then I gave him pretty defined muscles where his muscles were not covered by stuff, because he's an Olympic athlete and he's super buff and arrogant, and this one was just a lot of fun. Thank you so much for submitting it. Here is the final version. I want sick pecs and biceps like Narciso. You know what? Let's do this. Okay, we gotta get a pump on, and we need some protein. That's right, I'm still eating peanut butter in my videos for some reason. Next up, we've got a super cool Wolfie submission from Randoom Art and Tunes on YouTube. That's the name's got a fun flow to it. Randoom Art and Tunes. But anyway, he submitted stuff before. This is the first of his that I'm redrawing, and the character just jumped out to me because I love werewolves and I love fire, so this is like a fire werewolf kind of character, and I super dig it. Here's the description. His name is Spirit Wolf. He was accidentally created when a wolf got sent to a remote island with a bunch of mechanics and got nuked. He has fur that looks like fire, glowing red eyes, and a fire tail, and a bright wildfire at the tip. He can launch nuclear and fire blasts. When he is angry, his claws and teeth turn into fire. He comes in many forms, such as ice, rock, lightning, but in this form, he is in fire. And like I said, fire, wolf, can't go wrong. Thought it was super cool looking. Admittedly, in my version, I probably could have done a little bit more rendering to make the fur come across more as fur. That's something I've noticed that I'm not great at in my work lately, and I should probably work on that a bit, but obviously in this video I'm doing a bunch of different characters and didn't have time for that, and I still think this one looks pretty cool. Tried to make him a little bit more thin and lankier of a character. I don't really know why, I just thought I'd change things up a little bit, and werewolves kind of tend to have long limbs, and so I thought that would be a cool... I mean, this character's not actually a werewolf, he's just a, like, mutated wolf, like, elemental wolf, but, you know, just werewolf kept coming to my head. I also stretched the nose out a little bit more than I usually do when I'm drawing wolf characters, made him look a little bit creepier. I think it works really well for making him a little bit more villainous. And then the only other notable thing I did is right near the end, to make his hands a little bit more looking like they could produce flames, I added some like light glowy veins going through the fur, and I think that was a subtle but cool final addition. So thank you so much, Randu Martin Tunes, for submitting, and here is my redrawing of your drawing. And finally, we've made our way back to the character that I royally messed up twice, Sirlo's submission, who doesn't really have much of a description, specified that there's no name for the character or even specifically what her powers is, said I could come up with that. I didn't really come up with a name for the character, and in terms of the abilities, I just leaned into the fire ability. I went with a pretty similar design to what you submitted, and I, kept all the elements the same. This time around, I planned out what I was going to do with the skin textures a little bit better. That was one thing that was throwing me off the first few times I tried to draw this piece, was I just, in the coloring stage, just tried to draw in some random splotches to make the skin look a little bit burnt. And that didn't really work, so I tried something that I actually started doing inspired by ZHC when I worked on that motion poster for him last week, where I saw in his work he did kind of like indented square shapes almost, and then lined them with a little bit of extra shadow or lighting to make them pop a bit more, and I really like that. I do that on the face and then a little bit on the hands, and I think that works well. It doesn't necessarily read as burns, more just like scars or something, but I do think it's a really cool texture, and I've liked it every time I've done it on things. So that worked better. The other thing I had to think about for this was how the fire was going to affect the lighting for the character. That was really throwing me off on the first two rounds drawing this one. And what I kind of ended up doing was I sort of ignored the actual physics of the lighting a little bit. Like, the fire would have been lighting up this character a little bit differently from how I drew her. What I did was I started by just thinking about it like the character was being lit normally, shaded it all in, and then added some extra rim lighting based on where the fire was. Like, realistically, the side of her head should be a lot more lit up than I made it because there's fire right next to it. But I figured this is one of those situations where I felt like I should just go with what looks good, not with what is technically accurate. And I think that worked well for this one. This is one that I feel like if I'd spent 3 hours on it, it would have been a much cooler character. But obviously, for a video like this where I'm doing a bunch of characters, I can only spend about an hour, hour and a half on each one. And overall, I do really like this one. I think it's much better than the first two attempts I had at it, and I think it's a great one to end on. Thank you so much for the submission, Sirlo, and here is the final result. Those are some pretty awesome supervillains. And that, of course, is our background for the next month until the next community redraw episode, which is Spider-Sonas. I know it's an old trend, but so many people loved making their Spider-Sonas back when Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse was coming out, and drawing Spider-Man is just so fun, and lots of people always love when I draw Spider-Man on here, so I say, send me in your Spider-Sonas, and I'm gonna be redrawing a bunch of people's on this channel at the end of July. Whoop! Forgot to mention this when I was recording earlier, so I'm mentioning it now. To submit stuff, you can either join the Discord linked below and send your stuff to the Characters for Pop channel, or you can send it to popcrossanimations@gmail.com. If you DM it to me on Instagram or on the Discord, there's a good chance I miss it because I've been getting tons and tons of messages lately. So please, Characters for Pop in the Discord or popcrossanimations@gmail.com. Alright everybody, thanks again to everyone who submitted. This was a lot of fun as always. I'm Christian Pearson of PopCross Studios, home of the nerdiest art videos on YouTube, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.